I learned a beautiful phrase from therapy podcasts. First, take your life back, then let someone else into it. A year after the divorce, I really did take it back. I learned to have dinner without the silence that used to howl in the corners. I put out new cups, as if changing the accents in the room. Little by little, I brought back rituals. A hot shower before bed, a prickly towel on my shoulders, my own shampoo smell on my pillow. Little things that I once gave to marriage without noticing how. And suddenly, dating apps. A carousel of strangers' faces, smiles, dogs in the background. I love mountains and coffee. My fingers remembered the movement to the right and left faster than my heart. Joe, 42, architect, likes Italian food and long walks. His profile was simple and frankly almost boring, but that's what caught my attention. Not a single photo with a yacht, not a single phrase, looking for a partner in crime. A couple of shots in an office behind a model, one in a department store by the stairs, where he is in a dark jacket looking somewhere to the side. A closed smile everywhere. I didn't pay attention to it. Then, I only noted the calmness of his gaze and the correct, as if drawn line of his cheekbones. We corresponded easily, so easily that I caught myself in a silly teenage joy. The phone lights up. It means it was him. Joe was definitely asking questions, listening to the answers, sending funny voice messages with a soft R, like people who read a lot of presentations out loud. He arranged the meeting place so that we would have an equal ride. The center is between us, an Italian restaurant, a table for 7 p.m. I'll send the location. And he sent it, with the punctuality of an engineer and the care of a person who understands that I'm going on my first date in 15 years. Are we destined to be catfish? He wrote, and we exchanged fresh selfies. I took 24, chose one where the light from the window made the skin warmer and the eyes a little darker. He sent a photo from the parking lot, a jacket, a scarf, a toothless smile. A habit, probably. You are beautiful, he added, and I caught someone else's phrase on myself. Not thank you, but I tried. But I kept it in my head. Maybe it will come in handy. An hour before the meeting, I laid out the options on the bed like a children's lotto. A blouse, dark jeans, a simple pendant. Nothing flashy. I wanted to feel like myself, and not someone from a YouTube video about the first date after divorce. I brushed my teeth a little longer than usual, an absurd gesture, but I wanted to be correct. Perhaps I haven't applied lip balm so thoroughly in a long time. The car in the parking lot sighed when I got behind the wheel, and I drove off as if I were crossing not city blocks, but a line that I had drawn for myself a year ago. For now alone. The road took a little over an hour. Gray December was flowing under the window, warm, without snow, with wet lights. I repeated to myself, it's just dinner. One dinner. You can leave at any time. And one more thing, don't compare. Don't compare with a marriage in which compliments were given on a schedule and simultaneously with a reminder about the shopping list. Don't compare with the former you, who knew how to swallow and called it patience. The restaurant turned out to be intimate and cozy. Warm lamps, white tablecloths, glass bottles with olive oil, like a textbook on how people should meet. The hostess smiled, asked my name. I said, Joe. And a second later, he rose from his chair by the window and took a step towards me. In real life, he was exactly like in the photographs. Tall, collected, neatly trimmed gray hair at the temples. The jacket fits as if he was born in it. I felt the anxiety release, not a swindler, not a surprise from someone else's memorial. He smiled and said, hello. And at that moment, something happened that I was not at all prepared for. The light fell on his face, and I saw his teeth. Very yellow, gray in places, densely crowded with some strange angles, as if the row had once been pressed and forgotten to be straightened. The front ones were slightly pushed back, as if frightened. It was not an aesthetic flaw, but a visual shock, instantaneous like the sound of a dropped spoon. My face, it seems to me, became a blank screen for a second. I forced myself to breathe. I held out my hands. Hello, I repeated, and my voice responded softer than I felt. Selli. The menu became a lifeline. Fonts, sections, antipasti, pasta, fish. Joe confidently suggested risotto and white wine. He spoke calmly, without pauses that made you want to check your phone. He asked about my work. joked about the first date after the dinosaur era. That is, before Tinder. Listened, I caught everything good in him, mentally underlining it, like unevenness with a pencil. Attentive, punctual, soft. And yet my gaze returned to his mouth, like a compass needle held by a finger. I hated this gesture inside me. I hated my own fixation, as if a scanner had opened inside me that I hadn't asked for. I knew he didn't smoke. It was right there in his profile. He said he rarely drank coffee. I didn't smell it. Nothing would have told me in advance that something was wrong. And yet, it was as conspicuous as a sign. When he went to order dessert, I excused myself and headed to the bathroom. I locked myself in a stall, opened my phone, scrolled through his photos, then our selfies and the correspondence everywhere. A closed smile. Not a single frame where he laughed so that you could see his teeth. I felt a wave rise. Not from disgust, no, from a strange mixture of resentment and confusion. I was not deceived, but an important detail was hidden if I had known. I didn't know what would have happened, and that was what irritated me. The mirror above the sink reflected a woman with good lipstick and a very honest look. Are you really who you wanted to be? Straightforward, attentive to yourself, but not cruel? I asked her. She didn't answer. She bit her lip carefully, so as not to rub off the balm, and returned to the table. We talked for another 40 minutes about his projects and my new department, about how he moved after 40, because the best time for new walls is when you understand what kind of windows you like. About a funny old lady cat in his house. He paid, not even leaving a chance to grab his wallet, and suggested walking along the embankment. The evening was wrapped in golden garlands. The city at such moments becomes soft as breadcrumb. We walked side by side, telling stories where the heroes are us, only teenagers, and laughing. He pursed his lips in laughter. I noticed this, and each time it was as if I put a tick inside. He knows. And then the hardest part began. Inside, where there is no interlocutor. I argued with myself. One part whispered, "This can be fixed. He is successful. Why didn't you fix it? Maybe he doesn't notice. Maybe he doesn't attach any importance to it." Another, more tired part answered, "Do you want to be with a person who doesn't notice what is important to you? Are you really ready for maybe later after 14 years of later?" And a third part added, "You are superficial. Are you afraid to admit that appearance is important to you? Didn't you promise yourself to look deeper?" He stopped by the car. The light from the street lamp made his face clearer, the shadows sharper. He said he was glad we met, that the ease of correspondence had not disappeared. That, "If you don't mind, I'd like to see you again. Maybe at the gallery that weekend. I got the tickets." And he smiled, again the way he knows how, closing his teeth. But at the end of the sentence, for a second, as if he forgot himself, and the white warm moisture of the winter air sparkled on these crooked corners, on the gray-yellow spots, and my heart took another step back. I felt the words, "I'm not sure," form on my tongue. Polite, safe, but somewhere deeper, in another pocket of my soul, a completely different text was already rustling, awkward but honest. "Joe, I'd like to tell you straight out why I—" And at that moment his phone flashed in his hand. He glanced at it and, embarrassed, hid it. "Sorry, client." I nodded and he leaned closer, so much so that I saw a small scar on his upper lip and a thin crack in one side tooth, like a trace of an old, perhaps childhood injury. He asked quietly, "So what about Saturday?" I sucked in the cold and opened my mouth, already choosing between a polite formula and honest pain. And at that moment, the notification line popped up from his screen again, reflecting on the windshield of my car like the light of a lighthouse. I managed to read the first two words, and they froze me in the middle of my own answer. The first two letters on the screen flashed and disappeared so quickly that I could have decided that I had made it up. But I hadn't. There it was, oral surgery. And then there was a shifted notification, the name of the clinic, the date, Saturday morning. "So how about Saturday?" Joe repeated, already putting his phone away. "Let's text tomorrow," I breathed out, and my "let's" sounded like a compromise between honesty and running away. The drive home turned into a long line of questions. I switched gears and arguments. He was hiding it. It's not fair. He's going to have surgery. He's doing it. You're still fixated on appearance, superficial. Yes, but it's your right not to want the kiss to be a struggle with your own reactions. With each turn, these yes buts poured out like sand in the petals. At home, I turned on the yellow floor lamp, put the kettle on, and sat down at the table to write a message. Suddenly, this is that rare case when words can be collected into something that doesn't hurt. I typed, "Thank you for the evening. I had a really good time." I deleted, "You're a great person, but the spark." I hate the word spark I deleted. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I realize that it's important to me how a person takes care of themselves. It sounded like a report at the V-Contact Ethics Committee. I opened my notes and started making a list of for honesty and keep quiet. For honesty, I'm not wasting my time or his. Maybe this is useful feedback. I promised myself to be direct for keep quiet. He's an adult. His mouth is not my jurisdiction. Unsolicited feedback in the body area is almost always violence. So what? Am I a referee of apps with show me your bite remarks? The phone beeped from Joe. Did you get there? Didin Sarati. It was a pleasure. And yes, the gallery. No rush. Decide what's convenient. Good night. Attached to the message was a photo of the embankment. The same garland of lights, only without us, I replied, "Thank you, got there night." A period, like a stopper so it doesn't spill. In the morning I called Lisa back, that same friend who always has irony and a therapeutic intonation. We met in a coffee shop where the barista draws hearts even in the filter. "Can I say it in the most ugly way possible?" I asked. "Speak." Lisa took a sip and prepared herself not to judge. "I told you about closed smiles, about the shock when I saw about the notification with oral surgery, about how inside me there are two voices, a judge and a lawyer, talking to each other, and I'm in the middle, like a frightened intern." "Look," said Lisa, "giving feedback about someone else's body without asking is like entering an apartment without knocking, even with slippers at the entrance. You can explain, 'I'm uncomfortable,' you can leave, that's okay. But going to a person and saying, 'Here's a list of improvements,' is dangerous, even if you think it will help. If he asks, that's a different story, but you don't have to be his dental coach." "I don't want to be a coach," I said. "I want to be honest, and not be cruel." Honesty is telling about yourself. I understand that it's difficult for me. Cruelty is telling about him. There's something wrong with you. The difference is in the subject of the sentence. We were silent. Someone in the coffee shop laughed, loudly with all their mouths, and I caught myself automatically turning my head to look at the stranger's teeth. It horrified me. I don't want to live as an eye scanner. And also, Lisa added more softly, if a person has oral surgery on Saturday, then maybe he knows. And he's scared and he doesn't show it in his profile because he's not obliged to. It's not a lie, it's privacy. But I can choose not to go further, I clarified. Of course, the main thing is not to explain to a person what to do with his mouth. You can explain to yourself what you feel. That's enough, we hugged goodbye, and I went home with the feeling that my inner prosecutors had at least slightly dispersed to their offices. At home, I wrote, "Joe, yesterday was really nice. I'm not ready to answer about Saturday yet. Can I think about it?" He responded 2 minutes later, "Of course, and thanks for talking." All day I was busy with little things. I washed towels, sorted out a box of old postcards, but the thought was like a warm mouse rustling somewhere under the dresser. What if I ask? In a human way, without "you should," but with "I don't understand, can you clarify?" In the evening I typed, "It may seem like a strange question to me, but yesterday, when we were standing by the car, I accidentally saw a notification on your screen with oral surgery. If you're okay, will you tell me? If not, everything is fine." I reread "if you're okay" 3 times, like a talisman. He didn't answer for a long time. I managed to take a shower, dry my hair, apply cream, and only when I lay down the phone blinked. "It's not a secret," Joe wrote. "I just don't like to talk about it on a first date. Childhood, a bike accident, fuss, malocclusion, long-term fear of doctors. In my 20s, they did something crooked. Then I put off redoing it because work, moving, family, there was always someone more important. Last fall, I took pictures and realized either I solve this or it will get worse." Saturday is a consultation on stages. I'm nervous, to be honest. I buried my phone in my chest. Everything I had come up with about he doesn't notice, he doesn't appreciate, he doesn't care, fell apart, like a house of cards in a draft. I felt sticky with shame, not because the external is important to me, that's important and normal, but because of how easily I built a biography about him based on one image. Thank you for telling me, I wanted to write, but it sounded like a robot. I typed it differently. I understand about not for a first date. Thank you for sharing. I can admit, I noticed and was confused. I'm still learning how to be honest and not hurt. And again, I sent it, closing my eyes. It's okay, came almost immediately. We're both studying, and also, I don't show my teeth in the photo not because I want to deceive, because I don't like my smile. Someday I'll show it. I hope we agreed to call each other the next day. There was more air in Joe's voice on the phone, more pauses. He talked about the doctor who spoke in human language, about the several-stage plan, about possible discomfort. He didn't dramatize, but he didn't pretend that it was a trifle. And I listened and suddenly realized that I heard a strange feeling in myself, that I was lucky that I asked, that I didn't leave, leaving in my place instructions for improvement. At the end of the conversation, he said, "The offer with the gallery is still on? There is an exhibition there about renovation in time. The artist photographed old houses that are being restored layer by layer. I thought it was a funny metaphor." A bit literal, I couldn't help but say. We both laughed, easily for the first time in days. Saturday approached like a train, slowly but noisily. On Friday evening, I stood by the closet again, rearranging a dress and a jumper as if the fabric could decide for me. I didn't know if I was ready for intimacy with a person whose mouth is a battlefield with his own shame, but I knew for sure I was ready to go where the conversation is not about fixing, but about, how do you feel about this? I arrived at the gallery a little earlier and walked slowly through the White Hall. The photographs of the houses really were like X-rays: brick, plaster, traces of old windows. Joe stopped next to me, in a blue coat with slightly tousled hair. We smiled at each other in a new way, not hiding, but as if understanding that we both were hiding something and were tired. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Tomorrow morning, a consultation. I'm a little—" He searched for the word. Shaky knees. "Would you like some coffee after?" "If you're up to it," I offered, surprised at my own simplicity. "I would." He nodded as if he was getting his breath back. We walked along the photographs, and I caught myself looking at his lips, but in a different way, as a place where history lives. We sat down on a bench in the middle of the hall, next to a photograph of a wall on which old layers of paint were visible. Blue, then green, then pale yellow. "Can I ask a question and you don't have to answer?" I said. "Can I? Have you ever gotten comments, like feedback, from people about this?" "Yes," he answered after a short pause. "I have, from the rude ones. Why don't you fix this?" To the caring ones. "I have a hard time kissing." The worst ones are the ones that pretend to care but smell like shame. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, although I hadn't done anything yet. "For what?" "For all those times when someone wasn't a person, but an X-ray, and you're for the fact that yesterday I almost became one too." He shook his head. "The main thing is that you asked and didn't pass judgment." We were silent for a long time, looking at the photograph of the wall with transparent layers. Somewhere behind the partition, a tour was being broadcast. A woman was talking about restoration as a slow and precise matter, where you can't tear off an extra layer, otherwise you'll ruin everything. "You know," he said suddenly, not looking at me, "when I was 25, I dated a girl who said to me, 'You'd be perfect if right.' And I think I've heard that sentence tail in every sentence ever since." "If is a very dangerous animal," I replied. "It eats the real thing." He nodded, and then his phone lit up again. This time he didn't hide it. On the screen was a letter from the clinic with the subject, "Confirmation, tomorrow 9:30. And under that, an attachment. He lingered his gaze, then turned it to me. "Do you want to know the most unpleasant thing?" he asked. "What?" "The investment is an estimate." He smiled, with the corner of his mouth, slightly ironically. And in that smile, there was everything: fear, determination, weariness from if only. I extended my palm, carefully, so as not to frighten either the determination or the irony, and he placed his on top. "Let's do it this way. You survive the morning, and I'll bring you the best breakfast bun in town," I said, "and we'll talk about anything but teeth and budgets." "Deal." He nodded again. We walked around the hall, went out onto the street. The air was clear as glass. Joe walked me to the subway, and we stopped at the turnstile. He wanted to say something, but changed his mind. "See you tomorrow," we said at the same time and laughed. I dropped the card into the terminal, stepped toward the escalator, and at that very moment my phone vibrated. A short message came from Joe. "I'm going to print out the pictures now. There's something I've never shown to anyone. I want you to see it. But maybe after that you won't want to continue." I stopped at the first step and turned around. He was still standing at the railing looking at me, and I realized, tomorrow, after the estimate and the croissant, we will be looking at more than just photographs of someone's walls. "What is it?" I typed. Although I knew it would be better to ask out loud tomorrow, the answer came immediately. "I'll send you this evening. These are the before pictures, and that same letter from that girl at 25. For some reason, I'm keeping them." I clutched the phone in my palm. At the bottom of the escalator, the subway roared like a huge stomach of the city. Before pictures and letter are two doors I didn't expect to go through when I was putting on lipstick before just dinner. I took a step down and felt a knot tie in my stomach because I didn't yet know what I would see in these pictures, and that after reading the letter, I would want to answer its author. Although more than 10 years had passed in the evening, when the city was quieter than it should be on a Saturday, the mail arrived. From Joe, subject, as promised. There were 3 files in the attachments. 2 were photographs, black and white X-rays in which my gaze, like an inept archaeologist, tried to discern the familiar in an alien landscape. And 1 was a PDF titled Letter 2009. I opened the photographs first. The screensaver flashed dark arcs, white spots of roots, even and uneven lines, like a subway map of a city I don't know. In one picture, there was a line going to the side, uneven, as if someone had once pushed this path and it had been winding ever since. I remembered that thin crack in the side tooth that I noticed near the car. Suddenly, the aesthetic defect turned into the geography of the injury. Here is where the fracture occurred. Here is where the bone was rebuilt. Here is where the body took on what the splints, stitches, and grinding should have taken, and did not. I leafed through the pictures like someone else's baby album and felt something strange: relief. Not because there is a reason for everything. Relief that my imagination had stopped molding a guilty verdict out of ignorance. I left the X-rays open and clicked on Letter 2009. As the file unfolded, its letters clattered like rain on a windowsill, and I was met with a tone I knew all too well. Politely caring, but with sharp edges. "Joe, this is hard to write, but I believe in honesty. I really appreciate you. You are kind, smart, we have a lot in common. I thought about it for a long time because I don't want to seem superficial." Then came the same "if only," wrapped in cotton wool, sweetened with phrases like, "You deserve better, and I say this out of concern," but essentially an ultimatum. "Fix your body, then I can introduce you to my friends." I caught myself clenching my jaw, not from anger at an unknown woman. Each of us writes such letters at some point, even if we don't send them, but from the monstrous familiarity of the wording. The same, "I'm just being honest," that knives are used to hide behind. The same, "it's for your own good," that closes the door. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a minute, feeling my insides go cold. Then I opened it again and typed a letter in drafts that I would never send to its recipient. "Dear XX, I don't know who you were to Joe then, and I have no right to judge. But do you know what's most frightening about your 'if only'? It turns another person into a project. A project that can be submitted and a report written. But life is not a diploma and teeth are not a report." I didn't send it. The draft remained as a note on the refrigerator for myself. At the bottom, as a signature, I added, "A note for me for the next time I feel like helping with honesty. First, ask if you asked." Before going to bed, I wrote to Joe. I read, "Thank you for trusting me. Letter from 2009. Very painful. Want me to bring croissants from Pish Boosh tomorrow? We'll go with morning painkiller cocktails. He replied with a smiley and deal of the century 9:30 at the clinic. The morning was clear, like a clean glass. I arrived a little earlier, so as not to rush with my decisions. The lobby of the clinic smelled of something minty, and also of clean paper. The girl at the reception smiled in such a way that I wanted to believe the whole world. A couple of minutes later, Joe appeared, in a coat with a folder under his arm. He smiled again carefully, but without that convulsive stinginess that I saw in the restaurant. Make yourself at home? He pointed to a row of chairs. I won't be long, just to plan and discuss the estimate. This word is already the hero of our story, I said. I'll go get some coffee for now. How about you? Can I do it after anesthesia? If they don't take me to the operating room right now? He grinned. I came back with coffee and a paper bag. When he left the office, his cheek was slightly stiff and his gaze was focused. He sat down, put the folder on his lap, and closed his eyes for a second, like people who have just had an important conversation. How? Like repairing a roof on an old house, he said. First, strengthen the beams, then replace the slate. Any other way, it will leak. The first stage, I can start today. Cleaning, preparation, temporary overlays. Then, orthodontics, then perhaps surgery. This is not a weekend marathon, this is the season. And the estimate. Like a mortgage on a small balcony. He tried to joke, but fear still rang in his voice. We unfolded the papers. I didn't read the medical terms. I read between the lines. Time, patience, fear, hope. On one sheet there was a diagram, like a road map, arrows, stages, dates. I circled the first point with my finger. Today, 11:30. Are you starting? The doctor said it's better not to delay. I said, I have croissants. He said, the croissants can wait. Not all of them, I objected. I already ate 2 in the car. He laughed, and for the first time this laughter sounded not compressed but almost free. Hey, he said suddenly, I have a strange request. If they give me more pain relief today, I won't be able to drive. Can you? Yes, I answered too quickly. I can. He went into the office, and I remained in the chair with a bag that smelled of butter and warm dough. Never before had buns seemed so inappropriately alive to me. I looked at the front door of the office and thought about what would have happened if I had written him my bold, I'm just being honest, 2 nights ago. And I saw how his shoulders became a little harder, how one door closed with a click. I felt shame, not the blackening kind, but the useful kind. The kind that shows where the cold metal rang inside you. The door opened. The doctor, a woman in a green cap, looked out and said my name. I winced. How could she remember it? Then I realized. Joe must have said, Are you with Joe? He asked me to tell him everything was okay, about 20 minutes, and she hesitated. We're going to do something that will slightly change his appearance for a couple of weeks. He's worried. If you stay, that'll be good. I'll stay, I said, and I was surprised inside at how unconditional that yes was. I went outside to get some air and call Liza. I told her in a few words, Are you scared now? A little as if I agreed to go into a room where the repairs had not yet been done. This is life, said Liza. We don't only go to visit places where clean covers are stretched. When Joe came out, his face was slightly asymmetrical. He held his lip carefully, like a cup of hot tea. There were temporary caps on his front teeth, neat, strangers who still lived separately from him. He smiled, like a man trying on a new scarf. Unusual, awkward, but with relief in his eyes. Do I look like someone who swallowed an ice cube? He asked, touching my cheek. Look like someone who does something important, I said. Does it hurt? It's funny to say, but rather empty. It's as if the TV in the room had been turned off after hissing in the background for years. We left the clinic and walked to the park. He ate a croissant in small, very funny anesthetic pieces. I caught myself looking at his mouth, and I was no longer pushing away but worrying like I was worrying about a child's wound. He noticed my gaze and said, Can I ask you? If suddenly you ever find it hard, you will say to yourself, I'm scared, I'm embarrassed, I need time. Not, you need it, I can handle the first. The second, number. We have a deal, I said. We sat on a cold bench and shared a silence that had room for 2 people. I thought about my marriage, about how any of my me's there turned into you. I'm lonely, you're too demanding, I need attention, and you're being dramatic. And I realized maybe the main restoration in my life is not his teeth, but my tongue. We stopped at the metro. He leaned over, and I saw for a moment, like on a catwalk, a new line of his smile. Not ideal, no, but honest. He wanted to kiss me on the cheek, but froze for a split second, as if he was checking the water level inside himself. I began. He said at the same time. We laughed, but the laughter stopped because his phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out, and on the screen was the doctor's name and a short, "Can I come over?" "I have a question about the pictures." He looked up at me, and for the first time in days, there was something there that looked like fear without a mask. "Will you wait?" "Of course." We returned to the clinic. He disappeared behind the door, and I sat down, putting aside the bag with the still warm bun that I had not finished. Time turned into a long thread. People were changing at the reception. Dishes were clinking in the small staff room. I tried to read the news, but the words did not make sense. Finally, the office door opened slightly, and the same doctor came out into the hall. She looked around, met my gaze, and came closer. "Are you the one waiting for Joe?" "Yes." She sighed, not anxiously but seriously. "He asked me to talk to you. It's his decision. The scans showed something old that he might not have known. It's not dangerous, but it changes the plan. We'll have to—" She paused for a second, searching for the word. "Move very carefully, and maybe faster. He's a little confused. If he has someone he trusts nearby, now would be a good time to be there." She looked me straight in the eye and added, "And also, he said that he wanted to explain himself. He only asked to warn you that it's not just about teeth." I felt a tight ring tighten in my stomach, the same one that appears when the main chapter begins. The door to the office opened invitingly, a thin strip of light on the floor, like an exit sign. I stood up. The bag with the bun remained on the chair, warm, like a little heart. I took a step towards the door, and at that moment Joe's voice sounded from inside, unusually muffled after the anesthesia. "Can I call her?" "I want to tell you now," I caught the doctor's eye and realized the story really won't just be about teeth. The office was bright, as it is only in places where you want to see everything. The doctor motioned for me to sit down next to the chair. Joe was lying with his back raised, a white napkin under his cheek, his eyes clear, but there was that caution in them that I had already come to recognize, as if he was constantly trying out new words before he said them. "Thank you for coming," the doctor said, softly and businesslike. "I'll briefly recap what we just discussed. In the panoramic image, we saw the consequences of an old injury. There was an old fracture of the alveolar process, the area of bone where the teeth are held. Because of this, the roots of some teeth are at an angle, and there is thinning near the nerve canal. It's not dangerous, but we'll have to change the plan. First stabilize, then move. And move carefully so as not to catch the nerve. There may be temporary numbness, this will pass, but I warn you." She looked at me as if I was also a participant in the roof repair. "We can start the first stage today," Joe agrees, "but there's one more thing, and it's not purely dental anymore." The doctor nodded to Joe, and he turned his head towards me. The anesthesia slightly pulled the corner of his lip. His voice sounded a little muffled. He took a deep breath. "I've spent my whole life pretending that nothing was noticeable. Since I was 12, after that bike accident, I stopped laughing out loud and learned—" He tried to smile with his mouth closed and stopped himself. "Like this. At 25, I got a letter I forwarded to you. It said, 'You would be perfect if—'" After that, I learned not only not to laugh, I learned to hide myself. Photos, angles, words, everything became tools of protection. He closed his eyes for a second, and he licked his lips. "I put off treatment for years because I had a father with a stroke, and then campaigns with deadlines, and then a marriage where I don't have time for you yet. There was always something more important than being visible. I sat and felt shame rustling inside me, not the kind that demands you punish yourself, but a quiet working one, like a wet wipe used to wipe dust from a shelf at eye level. This is not just about teeth, about visibility. about how a person gets used to being neatly cut along the line of the mouth and stops noticing that he breathes with half of his lungs. And now, he continued, the doctor said that the first weeks I will not have a very nice period. Overlays, plates, all this. I will be able to live normally, but outwardly it will be a repair. And I realized that if I am afraid of this not because of the pain, but because I will be seen, I need to tell someone this to you. Not so that you decide for me, so that I myself will stop hiding at least here. The doctor stepped back delicately, giving us space, and added more quietly, I'll be there if you have any questions. And yes, about visibility, that's really more important than any estimate. When the door closed behind her, the office became slightly darker, as if the lamps had been turned down by half a notch. I placed my palm on the armrest so that he could reach it if he wanted. He reached awkwardly, saving the anesthesia but firmly. Joe, I said, I wrote a draft of a letter last night. Not to you, but to that girl from 2009. I didn't send it, of course. There was a lot in it about designing people for yourself and about the what-ifs that eat up life. But I think the real letter should have been written not to her, to myself. So that next time I feel like helping with honesty, I'll first ask, was I asked? He laughed quietly with one shoulder, a new laugh that I hadn't heard from him before. I'm glad you asked, and about honesty. If you want, talk about yourself. I can handle your, it's hard for me. I can't handle, there's something wrong with you. We were silent. I listened to the air returning to me, and suddenly I realized that I don't want to be here for the sake of nobility. I don't want to save. I want, if it will be we in the sense of two I and not you will become better and I will stay close as a foreman. I tested my internal boundaries for strength and found new doors in them. Then it's my turn to be honest, I said. I don't know how I'll feel with your teeth in a week or in 3 months. I know that it's important to me to feel a living person nearby, not a project. And it's important to me to be able to say I without fear. If that's what we're talking about, I want to try. Without promises of forever, but also without if only. He nodded, his eyes sparkling the way windows sparkle when they're finally cleaned. We have a deal, he said. The first stage actually began that same day. I was reading a magazine in the hall and caught myself hearing through the wall, not the sounds of instruments, but my own breathing, even as if I had finally caught up with myself after a long run. When Joe came out, the side of his face was slightly swollen. There were temporary splints on his front teeth. He smiled with the cautious pride of a man who had done something not about the view, but about life. Let's go, I said. I promise soup. The little cafe around the corner smelled of chicken broth and warm ceramics. We ordered 2 soups, and Joe ate slowly, blowing comically on his spoon. I looked at him, and for the first time in a week, my gaze didn't return to his mouth like an emergency beacon. It lingered on his gestures, on the funny crinkle around his eye, on the way he thanked the waiter with 2 words that sounded like really. Can I? He smiled sheepishly. Can I? What do you call it? He made a gesture as if he was touching the air above my cheek. Kiss my forehead? Yes, I think that's what adults call it, he said, and we both laughed. What followed was not a story of beautiful transformation, but a story of a calendar Mondays, photos, Wednesdays, settings Saturdays, banana and milk porridge, because sometimes it was hard to chew. Joe sent me hamster-level selfies and called them Restoration Diary. I responded with photos of my morning mugs. I, too, had begun a restoration, only an invisible one. I learned to say me. Not everything was beautiful. Once he canceled meeting 10 minutes before, he simply sent, I can't, it hurts. The old me would have written, you again, and a whole army of yous would have been born. The new me took a breath and sent, I'm hurt and lonely. I understood that it might hurt, but I wanted you to write earlier. Can we talk about this later? He replied 5 minutes later. We can. Sorry, I'm stuck in the same hiding I'm learning to write when I feel bad and not when everything is under control. It was a tiny pin in our structure, but without them, the roofs don't hold up. We went to the same gallery again, this time for the finale of the exhibition. There was a series of photographs on the wall. The house after. You can't say that it became like new, it became honest. You can see where they patched it up, where they left traces of time. We stood in front of the photo and smiled silently. I caught myself seriously thinking that I was tired of glossy stories. I'm no longer interested in perfect, I'm interested in chosen. On the ninth week, he sent a message without text, just a photo. He's standing by the window, he's wearing a gray t-shirt, the light is coming from the left, and he's smiling in a way he hasn't smiled in, it seems, 20 years. Not cinematic, uneven, stronger in one corner than the other, but wide, lively, without protection. My throat was congested. I didn't expect to feel such relief, as if I were seeing not a new face but a familiar one. Finally returning home, I went to him. We went out into the yard. The air smelled of rotten snow and pizza from the neighboring street. He handed me a small envelope. "This is a copy of that letter," he said. "I promised to show it, but—" He hesitated. "I don't want it lying around here. I decided that I wanted to do something symbolic with it." "Burn it?" I smiled. "I'm an architect. I'm for recycling and new meanings." He nodded at the waste separation bin and took out a lighter. "Okay, I'm kidding. Let's do it without fire." He took a small hole punch from his pocket and carefully punched the edge of the sheet. He inserted it into a small glass frame where his childhood photo was already lying, a boy with a blue scratch on his knee and the widest smile in the world, taken a second before that very fall. "Let it be like a museum caption," he said. Not if only, but this is how it was. And this is part of history, not a sentence. We put the frame on the windowsill. I looked at the boy, at the letter, at today's Joe, and I was suddenly overcome with a feeling of strange tenderness for all my befores. For the one who sat in the restaurant toilet and scrolled through selfies trying to find evidence. For the one who wrote instructions on how to be honest and not hurt, not yet knowing that honesty is the grammar of pronouns. I said, "I want one photo not for social media. For that place inside where you always want proof. What kind? Where there are two of us and both of us are with our mouths open?" "Literally? Are you sure you're ready for this level of art house?" He laughed. "I'm sure we took 100. We laughed, winced at the flash, cursed at the timer. In the end, we chose a shot where I laugh as if I were 10, and he laughs with his eyes. His mouth laughs too, but his eyes are stronger. We printed the photo on a home printer, and it came out slightly grainy, the best protection against gloss. In the evening, I sat down to write. To myself. Not to him, not to that woman from 2009, to myself. The one who a year ago rearranged the cups, like she was putting up the walls again. The rules, I wrote, that I want to keep. If I have a hard time, I say me and not you. If I feel like improving someone else, I ask if they ask me to. If I choose, it is my legitimate choice. It does not require justification, but requires respect for the privacy of others. Visibility is not a duty, but a trust. If you trust me, I will protect you. And finally, beautiful is not the opposite of honest. I closed my laptop and listened to the house. It breathed in a new way, maybe because there was now a photo frame with a boy and a letter hanging in it, and on the refrigerator there was a black and white shot of two adults who had finally managed to smile without clamps. As we said goodbye at the entrance, Joe pulled me close to him. We both knew his mouth was still a construction site. I touched my forehead to his temple, smelled leather and something minty, and thought that perhaps the most beautiful thing about someone else's appearance is the habit of no longer hiding. "You know," he said quietly, "today, for the first time in many years, I didn't ask the barista for a to-go lid, so I could drink my coffee outside and not show my mouth. And for the first time in many years, I didn't measure the distance between 'it's important to me' and 'you need it.' It seems like we're having a synchronous renovation." He smiled. We stood like that until the light in the entrance went out and clicked again. Then I kissed him, carefully near the corner of his lips where it doesn't hurt. And in that short kiss was everything I wanted to say. I'm not here for the ideal. I'm here for the choice. As I walked to the car, the snow began, fine, like salt. It fell on my shoulders, on the hood, on the roof, carefully, without trying to instantly become beautiful. It was just there I thought about how strange happy endings sometimes look, without fanfare, without the final shot with fireworks. Sometimes the ending is a frame with a baby photo on the windowsill, a letter deprived of power, and a person next to you who learns to say me and listen to me of another. Sometimes the ending is a smile where there is no perfection, but a decision to be visible. And this is the very point that I once asked the therapist for. Not a point in the sense of an end, but a point of support. You can stand on it with both feet and move on.